In 2019, Japanese anime studio Science Saru reached out to Canadian comics creator Brian Lee O'Malley with interest in making an anime adaptation of his Scott Pilgrim graphic novel series. O'Malley developed a script in collaboration with American screenwriter Ben David Grubinski, which was eventually sent to Japan to be animated under the supervision of Spanish director of animation Abel Gongora, best known for his work on Hands Off Eizouken. 2023's Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is produced by British filmmaker Edgar Wright and American screenwriter Michael Bacall, who respectively directed and co-wrote the 2010 Hollywood movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. The voice cast for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off overwhelmingly features actors from the 2010 live-action film, all of which were excited to reprise their roles after all these years. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is very clearly a passion project that features the work of skilled artists and actors from many different countries around the world. And it is unfortunately for that reason that the series has sparked controversy in the English-speaking anime community. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off has been labeled as not anime by many English-speaking otaku, including the administrators of MyAnimeList.com, who refuse to even list the anime on their website. This series has reignited an age-old debate among Western otaku over what is or is not anime. And some of these arguments deserve to be extinguished. What is anime? Many otaku out west may be shocked to learn that the colloquial English definition of anime is much more narrow and restrictive than how the word is used in Japan. In general conversation, Japanese people don't make a distinction between anime and cartoons. For example, Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away is one of the most well-known anime films in Japan, so is Disney's Frozen. Both movies are considered to be anime because anime is merely the Japanese word for animation. In fact, some weebs may be absolutely scandalized to learn that anime is actually an English loanword, meaning the term is not originally Japanese. This is why the word anime is commonly written in katakana, because there is no kanji for words that do not originate in Japanese. Japanese isn't even the only language to refer to animation as anime. The French use the term dessin animé, literally meaning animated drawing. My French is a little rusty, so correct me if I'm wrong, but if a French speaker were to talk about anime, they would specifically refer to it as anime japonais. All that being said, I am not making this video to convince you that there is nothing unique or distinctive about what us weebs call anime. As I said before, among English-speaking otaku, the term anime means something very specific. And yet, what is or is not anime is still something that is very much hard to define. You see, there are three main colloquial definitions of anime, and these differing notions are often a point of contention in online discussions. There are people who consider anime to be a specific art style, while others consider anime to be a separate medium of art in and of itself. Last but not least, we have purists who believe that real anime can only come from Japan. While not necessarily incorrect, as I break down these three definitions, you'll start to realize that narrowing down what is anime to certain criteria is easier said than done. Let's start by tackling the idea of anime as an art style. Most people, when they think of an anime character, picture the same basic design elements. Spiky hair, big eyes, triangle nose, or maybe no nose at all. These are all basic character traits that most people would consider to be recognizably anime, even to people who might not be the most familiar with anime. The idea of this big-eyed anime protagonist is ubiquitous to the point of being the default American representation of Japan. You can find characters like this printed on merchandise, used in advertisements, and even satirized in American cartoons. Go to your local public library or bookstore, I guarantee you will find a how to draw anime book filled to the brim with generic spiky-haired teens, because this is what anime is to so many people. At this point, you may be thinking, "You've done it, Lenka, you've just defined anime. How could this video possibly continue after this brilliant revelation?" To which I will respond with Crayon Shinchan, Doraemon, and Sazai-san. No, I did not just cast a spell on you. I just named 3 of the most popular anime in Japan, and none of them feature that oh-so-well-known anime art style. Now, let's take a moment to talk about Ben 10, Teen Titans, and The Simpsons? 3 American animated series whose character designs fit our current definition of anime. These 3 shows feature characters with spiky hair, big eyes, triangle nose or not applicable nose, yet I personally would not consider these cartoons to be anime. The problem with defining anime as an art style is you will inevitably encounter series that are distinctly anime, yet do not fit within the proposed limitations of the supposed art style. This brings us to our second definition of anime as a medium. Let's start by making sure everyone knows what I mean when I say medium. We all know the term genre. Well, medium is like genres of art. Are you working in the medium of music or literature, animation or live action? The term medium can also be used within a specific art form. For example, 2D and 3D are mediums of visual art. Our current proposed definition is that anime is too broad to be considered an art style, so it must be a medium of animation. Not to get too biased in my own opinion piece, but I like the idea of anime as a medium because it takes away the focus from the superficial aspects of anime and instead focuses on the building blocks of anime. What are the techniques that make an anime animation different from a cartoon animation? The iconic look that sets anime apart from cartoons is largely due to the industry's usage of limited animation techniques. Anime typically makes use of static characters and backgrounds and relies on camera movement and visual effects to create the illusion of depth and motion. This is opposed to cartoons, where characters will often be drawn off model to accentuate their actions, but the camera will stay put, making the background seem almost like a facade that the characters are acting against. Anime typically uses less keyframes, but will put an emphasis on in-between frames. Some anime directors actually give their in-between animators a certain amount of leeway to convey themselves through their work. These particularly expressive scenes have been noticed by anime fans and given the name sakuga. In Japanese, sakuga apparently means drawing or painting, but the English-speaking anime community has appropriated the word to mean high-quality or fluid animation. Basically, sakuga is when the animators go sicko mode. The problem with considering anime and cartoons to be their own separate mediums is that American kids who grew up watching anime have turned into adults who now work in the animation industry. These animators are taking elements of the Japanese workflow and they're applying it to American cartoons, thus blurring the line between these supposed mediums. Take, for example, one of my favorite modern cartoons, Adult Swim's Ballmasters 9009. At first glance, this series looks like a typical ugly adult cartoon, but you should take notice of the usage of those anime camera tricks I was talking about, and then bam! this cartoon will bust out sakuga that put some anime to shame. Ballmasters honestly has some of the most anime animation I have ever seen. Looking at how crazy some of these action scenes get, you would think they were animated by Studio Trigger. Actually, that gives me a good idea. Let's take a moment to talk about Trigger. Studio Trigger was founded in 2011 by anime veterans Hiroyuki Imaishi and Masahiko Otsuka, after the two of them had ended their long careers at anime studio Gainax. At this point in time, the anime industry had reached a stage some might describe as stagnation, where the industry shifted from producing original media to primarily adapting existing IP. At the time, Trigger was heralded as the studio that would save anime, because their first TV animated project was not an adaptation, but a new original property. Now, the jury's still out on whether anime was saved, but I do find the notion that Trigger would be the ones to do it slightly humorous, because the big guns over at Trigger are heavily influenced by American adult cartoons. This cartoon influence can be seen throughout Imaishi and Company's careers, but it's most apparent in Trigger's first production, Inferno Cop. As you can immediately tell, Inferno Cop has less in common with its anime peers and more in common with Adult Swim's Space Ghost Coast to Coast and Harvey Birdman Attorney at Law. I could spend a couple minutes waxing poetic about what makes Inferno Cop unique and beautiful, but I'm just gonna get straight to the point and say that Inferno Cop looks nothing like any anime I've ever seen. This series doesn't have that immediately recognizable anime art style, nor does it make use of the staple techniques of the anime industry. And yet, Inferno Cop is an anime. So, if art style is too broad a term, but medium is too restrictive, what exactly is the common thread that unites all anime? What do the anime King's Avatar, To Be Hero, King of Pigs, and Tai Chi Chasers all have in common? Here's a hint, it's not Japan. That's right, all of these animations that look like anime, quack like anime, and are listed on myanimelist.com are not technically anime, if you believe that anime specifically comes from Japan. This is why I described unifying anime under one definition as being easier said than done. You'll think that you've finally found one common thread that ties together all anime, only to realize that the series you've been watching on Crunchyroll isn't technically an anime, it's a Chinese donghua dubbed in Japanese. By the way, if you're interested in watching the To Be Hero series, I recommend watching the original version because the Japanese dub is butchered like it's a 4Kids localization. Speaking of 4Kids, I remember watching Tai Chi Chasers on the Toonzai Saturday morning anime block, and I had no idea this series was a South Korean animation. The series had the shonen genre nailed down so well, I had no reason to question the show's authenticity as an anime. To be completely honest, this section of my essay hasn't turned out quite like I had hoped. My intention was to list anime from around the world that are featured on the site MyAnimeList, but for some reason, the site only lists anime from China, South Korea, and Japan. This disappoints me because during my research, I found some pretty cool anime coming out of Southeast Asia. From the Philippines, they have the Netflix series Trese, and from Indonesia, they have Angel Dive. At first, I gave MyAnimeList the benefit of the doubt that maybe they only list series that are distributed in Japan or made in collaboration with Japanese companies, but then I found a Filipino anime made in collaboration with Toei Animation that is not listed on the website. All of this begs the ultimate question. What is MyAnimeList's definition of anime? For an animated work to be considered anime in the eyes of the My Anime List admins, that work must be animated, created by professional staff in Japan for the Japanese market, meant to be an animated work, and not an edit, cut, or promo of another animated work. In addition to these rules, it is specified under country of origin that animated works created in Korea for the Korean market, in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan for their respective markets, and as a joint production between Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, and another country for both markets shall be listed in the My Anime List database. As far as my research has led me, I found no explanation as to why Southeast Asian works are not considered for entry into the database. However, we do have an explanation as to why Science Saru's Scott Pilgrim Takes Off does not meet My Anime List criteria for entry. Apparently, the folks over at MAL believe that the series was not created for the Japanese market. The way My Anime List determines whether or not an animated work counts as a joint production between Japan and another country intended for both markets is by taking a look at the production staff in an attempt to discern who is in control of the project. If a significant amount of the important roles are performed by anime staff, the series is considered a joint production. If not, the animation is considered to be outsourced. Steven Universe, for example, was animated in Korea, but the majority of the important stuff was done in-house at Cartoon Network Studios. Steven Universe would not count as an anime. Now that we understand the criteria, let's see how well Scott Pilgrim Takes Off holds up. The series was directed by Abel Gongora, who we've already established as being from Spain, but he spent the last decade living and working in Japan as one of the earliest employees at Science Saru. So he can't possibly be the problem. The episode directors all seem to be Science Saru staff, as are the storyboarders, character designers, art director, animators, and background artists. Even when I do find a non-Japanese name in the credits, they turn out to be an employee at Saru. The only exceptions are the people involved with the English dub and the scriptwriters, one of which happens to be Mr. Scott Pilgrim himself, Brian Lee O'Malley. By My Anime List's own criteria, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is a joint production. I'm just having a hard time understanding how the series isn't an anime created for both markets. Is it because the source material is Canadian? So is the source material for Spider Riders, but that's allowed to be on the site. This brings us to a section I refer to as Calling Out My Anime List's Hypocrisy. I have seen many people across the internet do their own versions of this, and they typically like to harp on the fact that Mal lists Batman Gotham Knight and the various Marvel anime that came out a decade ago. But Batman and Wolverine are two of the most popular superheroes in the world. Who's to say that Japanese people wouldn't be interested in them? No, I have found two different anime that I think best illustrate My Anime List's hypocrisy. The first being Halo Legends, an anime anthology featuring a short directed by Mamoru Oshii. Holy shit! So what exactly is so bad about this Halo anime? Well, it's mostly the fact that Mr. Chief is the de facto mascot for Xbox, a console that has consistently sold poorly in Japan. For those who don't know, the original Xbox was pretty much dead on arrival in Japan. The console was bigger and bulkier than its sleek and slender Japanese counterparts, as well as more expensive. The final nail in the coffin for the OG Xbox was ultimately its lack of Japanese-developed games. Now, don't get this twisted as some kind of console wars BS. You can still be a weeb if you prefer Xbox over PlayStation. My point is that Xbox exclusives have always been catered to a Western audience. So in what way does an anime adaptation of the most famous Xbox exclusive count as something created for both markets? I'm not saying that Halo Legends doesn't count as an anime or shouldn't be listed on the website. I'm just confused as to why an anime adaptation of a game that is most popular outside Japan is considered more suitable for the Japanese market than an anime adaptation of an anime-inspired comic. This second anime represents what I believe to be the most egregious act of Mal's hypocrisy. Cannon Busters. Before Cannon Busters was a Netflix anime, it was but a humble Kickstarter. And before it was a humble Kickstarter, it was an even humbler indie comic written and illustrated by LaShawn Thomas. If the name LaShawn Thomas sounds familiar, it's because you have great taste in American animation. Thomas is most known for his work as character designer and co-director for seasons 1 and 2 of The Boondocks, but he has made quite the name for himself in South Korea for apparently being the first American to be hired as permanent in-house production staff at a Korean studio. As impressive as that is, I'd like to focus more on his early exploits as an artist in America, specifically surrounding the creation of Cannon Busters. You see, I picked Cannon Busters because it represents a very specific act of hypocrisy, more so than it being a Netflix anime adaptation of an American indie comic directed by a New Yorker who currently calls Tokyo his home. LaShawn Thomas and Cannon Busters have a connection to Brian Lee O'Malley and Scott Pilgrim Takes Off by way of their mutual friend and collaborator, Corey Lewis. Corey is an American comics author and illustrator who is relevant to this conversation because he contributed art to both these anime's source material. Ray was the cover artist for issue 0 of Cannon Busters, as well as the apparent logo designer for the series, if I'm remembering correctly. This logo was used both for the comics and the anime adaptation. As for Scott Pilgrim, Corey provided some interior art for the comic, including an illustration in the author bio section of Volume 1. The character Scott Pilgrim actually makes an appearance in Corey's comic Peng, a sports anime-inspired kickball comic. It absolutely bothers me to no end that despite the numerous similarities between these two Netflix anime adaptations of North American indie comics, even down to the point that both comics feature work from the same artist, one is allowed entry into the My Anime List database and the other is not. One is considered to be created for the Japanese market, and the other is not. To what end, My Anime List? In an attempt to be fair and balanced, I have been writing these last few paragraphs with the intent to play devil's advocate, but no amount of mental gymnastics can provide an explanation that absolves the mal-admins of their blatant hypocrisy. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off has an art style that is recognizably anime. It features all the tropes of the anime medium, and it was developed in Japan by a Japanese staff, with the exception of the script being written in part by a Canadian. Not only does it meet the expectations of every colloquial American definition of anime, but it also meets My Anime List criteria for entry into their database. And yet, here we are having this conversation. This stupid conversation that has prompted me to write this essay and think critically about something I would not normally give any second thought. Like, of course I know what anime is. I know it when I see it. But can I define it? Quantify it? That's not so easy. I honestly think My Anime List criteria provides the most comprehensive and inclusive definition of anime, It's just unfortunate the site is not immune to pointless gatekeeping. Anime